What started as a trip to support my friend and past podcast guest Sonny Smith at his title fight professional bare-knuckle boxing match in Alberta, along with other friends and past guests Jason Budd and Chance Burles, turned into an opportunity I couldn't pass up. I sat down with Alberta's Chief Firearms Officer, Dr. Teri Bryant, to dive deep into the politics and realities of firearms ownership in Canada. Ever wonder why some guns are banned while others aren't, despite being essentially identical? Tired of feeling like a criminal for exercising your right? Want a glimpse into what the future could look like for Canadian firearms owners? Buckle up, because we're breaking it all down. From Alberta's fight for sensible laws to how you can take action. This episode is brought to you by the amazing people at Armament Technology. Silvercore Club members, don't forget, you get 10% off Tangent Theta, 15% off SAI, and 20% off Tenebrex. Now, let's get it rolling. I'm joined today by Alberta's Chief Firearms Officer. She's a dedicated advocate for responsible firearms ownership, bringing a wealth of experience and a balanced approach to firearms regulation in Alberta. We have the opportunity to explore her unique perspective on the challenges and opportunities facing the firearms community and how she's working to ensure fairness and safety in the province. Welcome to the Silvercore Podcast, Dr. Teri Bryant.
Thank you, Travis. It's a pleasure to be here today.
So, 3 years? Are we on your 3-year anniversary today?
3 years yesterday.
3 years yesterday. Holy crow.
Yeah.
3 years you've been a firearms officer here and a chief firearms officer for Alberta.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. I had no idea what I was getting myself into when I agreed to this.
Myself, personally, there's always been confusion about sort of the hierarchy within the firearms program, what it takes to be a firearms officer, let alone what it takes to be a chief firearms officer. Opt-in and opt-out provinces has always been something that's been a little bit confusing to me, and I know others have brought that up as well. Can you tell me a little bit about sort of how you got into this and what the structure kind of looks like?
Okay, so I got into this in a different way than most people who are chief firearms officers. So if I could just take a step back. So there's a chief firearms officer in every province. So there's 10 of us, plus there's one for the Northwest Territories. And most of those were appointed in a different way than me. Because, and this comes to your point about opt-out and opt-in provinces and so on. So opt-in provinces are ones where the province has assumed responsibility for the administration of the Firearms Act, the Federal Firearms Act in Canada. And so that means that the Chief Firearms Officer is appointed by the province, and the employees in the Chief Firearms Office, the firearms officers and other individuals there, are provincial employees. An opt-out province is a province that has chosen not to participate in the program, and that means that all of the Chief Firearms Officer is appointed by the federal government, and all of the employees are federal employees. And Alberta was an opt-out province, as was Saskatchewan, until September of 2021. And then there was a lengthy process before that to reach the decision, but on September 1st, 2021, we became an opt-in province, which meant that my appointment came from the Minister of Justice and Solicitor General at the time. Now we're just within the Ministry of Justice because they've kind of split that off.
Right.
But, and of course, it had to be approved by Cabinet and everyone up to the Premier.
Yeah.
And all my staff are provincially appointed as well. So all the Chief Firearms Officers have the role of administering the Canadian Firearms Program in their province. Of course, how much they actually do themselves versus delegating to employees depends on the size of the office.
Right.
If you're Ontario or Quebec and you have millions of people you're serving, then you're not going to be as hands-on. If you're looking after Prince Edward Island and you've got just a couple of people, probably you're going to be much more hands-on.
Yep.
Whether in the provincial public service or the federal public service.
So this is unique. Alberta is the only province that has a situation like this for the chief firearms officer?
Well, technically, we're unique. We weren't unique for a bit. So there are two um, uh, chief firearms officers who have the expanded mandate that I have, and that's in Saskatchewan and Alberta. Saskatchewan went provincial a few weeks after we did, but uh, they've since changed their structure a little bit so that their chief firearms officer with the same title is a non-political person,
Okay.
the equivalent of my deputy,
Yeah.
who is a member of the public service, and uh, the the person who previously was the chief firearms officer, they now call him the commissioner of firearms.
Got it.
And
Okay.
so that's Robert Freeberg, and so he has the firearms office and a couple of other things. In Saskatchewan, they didn't previously have a ballistic forensic lab, and when they created one, they put it under that. And there's a couple of other things that's under his control there as well.
In your role as a
Yeah.
chief firearms officer, and I've actually got I got a handy dandy little sheet here that outlines the role of the chief firearms officer in Alberta, which I thought was pretty neat. I know you and I, we looked at this before. Chief firearms officer with respect to firearms matters in Alberta shall develop and implement policies, procedures, and strategies. That's a big mandate. Shall identify and conduct studies of specific issues or a specific subject matter and may publish the results of those studies. There's a lot of trust right there. That's shall review the programs and policies of the government or other jurisdictions that may affect individuals as firearms users and owners, shall consult with and provide support to stakeholders. This is an interesting one. E, shall engage in advocacy for and outreach to Alberta's firearms community. And I'll just go through the last couple. Shall provide information and advice to all levels of government. Shall develop and implement initiatives in coordination with other departments. Shall recommend the establishment of advisory boards or advisory committees by the minister with respect to specific issues or specific subject matter, and shall inform and educate Albertans, and shall carry out any other prescribed responsibilities. That's a pretty broad mandate. That's a lot of responsibility, but the one that I thought was really interesting was shall engage in advocacy for and outreach to Alberta's firearms community.
Yes. And so that's actually what I, that list that you have just enumerated, that's in addition to my role as being responsible for the administration of the Federal Firearms Act in Alberta. And so that part, the part that I do that is the same as what other people do who are chief firearms officers across the country, that's a relatively small part of my time, less than half, certainly.
Okay.
And because there are certain things like range approvals and that I have to do personally. But most of my time is on the other part, which is the list that you've enumerated there, particularly to shorten that list. Part of my job is not just to administer the law as it is now, but to figure out what it should be and advocate to make changes. And so part of finding out what it should be is, as you've mentioned, conducting formal studies and things like that. And we've got a couple of those underway. And another part of it is consulting with Albertans to find out what their problems are. Now, many of those are things that I was aware of before, but, no one in the firearms community is very, very diverse, right? It includes people who are Olympic target shooters. It includes ranchers who have a rifle in the pickup truck for protecting their livestock or things like that. And so I've been a member of the firearms community all my life, so I have had exposure to many of these things, but more to some than others. And so every weekend, basically, I am out at some kind of event, whether it is a gun show or a shooting competition or the annual general meeting of an organization, so that I can hear straight from Albertans what the issues are that they face. And also that gives me an opportunity to educate them a little bit about what our office does, what the federal government does, what we are as an office are doing about what the federal government does, and things like that. So that's a very it's a part of the role that I very much enjoy because it gets me out talking to Albertans, particularly firearms owners, who are, that's the community. Those are my people, as I always say. And it also means that I get to go all around the province. So I travel over 30,000 kilometers a year by car around the province. And so I've visited everywhere from Milk River, 10 kilometers north of the U.S. border, to Fort Mac in the north, from Grand Prairie and Beaver Lodge and Coleman in the west to Medicine Hat and Consort and Provost in the east. So it's enabled me to see much more of the province than most people see, and because I also all my permanent homes in Calgary, I have an apartment in downtown Edmonton. I get to see a lot more diverse aspects of Alberta than most people do because I see the rural areas, I talk to rural people, I have this apartment in downtown Edmonton where I see some of the challenges that people in urban settings face. So it gives me a very diverse perspective on what Albertans are experiencing and what they need, and it gives me the opportunity to talk to people from a wide range of backgrounds.
Now, you come from a long lineage of firearms owners and users and collectors, and I as well. From a very young age, being exposed at the gun shows and in the firearms community and watching the different rules and regulations as they come into place. There's been a growing sort of us against them sort of mentality and like, why are they picking on us? Sort of mindset within the firearms community. Was that a challenge for you to overcome when you first came into your position as a chief firearms officer? I know now you're welcomed with open arms, but were you looked at as the enemy when you first came in?
Well, so there were certainly a lot of people in the community that knew me, like particularly those around Calgary and in the collecting community, and so those people knew me and they were happy to see me take the job. But of course, there are a lot of people in the firearms community who are in other areas of the province who may not have known me as well, and a lot of people in the firearms community that have a more tenuous connection, like they're not plugged in as much. Because I know for people like you and me, every day we're looking and seeing what's the latest thing, and we get all kinds of email blasts from the different organizations about the latest court decisions and challenges and things like that. But a lot of people aren't that connected, and so what I did to start off with was initially using my own vehicle, my own materials, and my own, paying for it myself to start with. I went to gun shows, which is a place where a lot of different parts of the firearms community intersect, and set up a display with some firearms that I thought would attract attention because I have some firearms that tend to attract attention. I like to have the coolest guns at any gun show. And so a matter of opinion, but I'm not a totally unbiased judge of that subject. But what would happen then is, as people are walking by, they would see I had signs, and they would see, oh, here's some cool guns, and then it would give me as soon as they pause, then bang, I'm like like an insurance salesman or something. I jump on it and make my pitch and engage in a conversation, and then more and more people realized that we were doing things differently, that we do have to administer the federal law. We don't get to make the law ourselves yet, but we do have. It can make a big difference in how things are done, because I believe that most people are reasonable, and if you approach them in a reasonable fashion, and then you'll get a much more positive reaction. So we try not to bang on the table and say you have to do this or you have to do that. We educate them about what the law is and what potential consequences are if you don't do that. But we also point out that many of these things, many aspects of firearms regulations in Canada don't make sense. And so we talk to them about that, recognize that we know that it doesn't make sense that this particular firearm is classified this way and this one that's the same is classified a different way. So that we understand and sympathize with the problems there, but not just that we sympathize, but that we're actively engaged in trying to change that. And that, I think, has resulted in a totally different reception. So people want us to come to gun shows. And now, of course, we have a much more elaborate way of participating. So I have some fancy tablecloths and pop-up banners. And ever since the federal government required that sellers of non-restricted firearms verify the validity of the PALs of buyers, that was very hard for people to do in the gun show environment. So I have my staff come there, and we've worked out an arrangement with the registry so that we can provide that service in person at shows, which is something that doesn't happen everywhere and happens in few places elsewhere. But that's what we needed to do to be able to ensure that gun shows were able to remain compliant with the law, and that they were there wasn't going to be an easy way for the feds to shut them down.
And you bring up a few different points here, and I'm trying to think of which would be the most logical for me to move from. But maybe the education piece there. And I know I've talked on the podcast before about the firearms officer who explained to me about normative process, and we've chatted about this as well. I had a just like you're saying, why is something deemed as one classification and it's the same as another firearm and it's deemed in a different classification. And there was a point of confusion around the classification of firearms that I was in possession of through my business. And the firearms program had come in, they looked at them, they had verified them, a couple of firearms officers, and they said, Travis, you have to register these as this type over here. And I'm sitting there all paranoid and nervous and like, what are you trying to entrap me into? Because it's the law says different. I look at it different, but I tell you what, if you want to do it, you guys proceed, you go ahead and you register it as you see fit, right? And they said, no, we want you to do it, Travis. And I'm like, oh man, what are they trying to do here? So I talked to my MLA, she talked to Minister Blaney, and then they said, this doesn't make sense. Just tell them to hold off. We're discussing it at the ministerial level. I mentioned this to the firearms officer when this fellow was in my business, and he said, we don't give an expletive what Minister Blaney says. I don't give an F what the MLA says. They don't make the laws, we do. And he's explained to me it was done through a process of normative process. Now, that's one individual talking out of his pocket, talking about his opinion, but it's easy to paint the general mass by the actions of the one. But there was an apology that came through really quickly the next day, but it brought to mind the issue of normative process. He says, if we do things in a certain way, if there's layers of ambiguity within the law, the courts will turn around and say, well, how's it generally done? How's it accepted? And that's where I see the value of this education, both for the general public, the firearms community, as well as for the firearms program, for everyone to be singing from the same song sheet, to understand the struggles that the firearms community has, which you've got your finger on the pulse there, and for the firearms community to understand the struggles and limitations that the firearms officers have to deal with. And if we're able to sing from the same song sheet and create a normative process that works for public safety for everybody, and was able to navigate the ambiguity of all the hodgepodge of firearms laws that we have, I think that's where the power of discussions like this really comes into play. Since you are intimately aware of the firearms community, both as prior to being chief firearms officer, as well as even more so now that you're in this position, what what are some of the common things that you see that people have contention with, that maybe they're approaching it in a fashion that's not serving their best interests, and maybe there's a better way that it can be approached?
Well, I think the main thing is to understand that, at least in our case, our goal is to preserve the firearms community. Of course, our number one goal is public safety.
Sure.
But I actually believe we need to preserve the firearms community in order to maintain public safety. And the reason for that is that every country has a firearms culture. And so the firearms community, in all its different aspects, whether it's gun shows, people who are training people to get their hunting license, people are training to get their firearms license, all of these people, gun clubs that organize shoots and so on, all of these people are contributing to forming a culture. And I feel that the firearms community is a very positive influence. It can be a very positive influence, and we can shape that a little bit by helping them to understand, what is required to comply with certain rules and things like that. But if we create a firearms culture that is based around responsibility and respect and safety, then that's going to pay huge dividends in terms of public safety. And on the other hand, if you got rid of the firearms community, like somehow you managed, some Mandarin in Ottawa waved a magic wand and
Yes.
we all went away.
Yeah.
And I suspect there are a few that might want to do that.
Sure.
But if they suddenly did that, there would still be a firearms culture in Canada. But how would that be shaped? It would be shaped by like ultra-violent video games and movies coming out of Hollywood and social media posts by gangbangers and things like that. And that would be how people thought about firearms. And that would not contribute to public safety, because then if people saw a firearm, they'd, this is how you do it. You wave it around like this and you go like this to look tough and
right.
this kind of thing. And so the firearms community, in all its aspects, and all the people who work very hard, using their own free time, often their own resources, to educate people. People who, for example, at a collector's show are educating people about the historical value of firearms and the role that they have played in the evolution of our society and the technologies of it. It creates a different mindset around them, and that's something that contributes very greatly to public safety and that we want to continue to encourage.
Yeah, I find like different groups will attract different types of people. The firearms community, I find, tends to attract a lot of independent-minded sort of individuals.
Yeah.
I was teaching a class of training instructors to teach a basic firearms safety course, and just for fun, I ask them, like, aside from guns, like, what are you into? And by and large, everyone comes back with, well, I'm into scuba diving, or I'm into rock climbing, or I'm into collecting, or I'm into, and all their other activities that they're listing off aren't team activities. They aren't group sort of activities. And I find to a degree that can fragment the firearms community, because everyone's like, just leave me alone, let me do my own thing. And then they will also try and lean on other organizations to make things, to affect sort of change for them, whatever that might be. And they sort of give control over to a third party without realizing the amount of personal agency each individual firearms owner actually has when it comes to affecting change within the community, within the culture, the laws, and dealing with the firearms program. I know there's a lot of very frustrated individuals when they talk about the OIC, the recent Order in Council, or they talk about the handgun freeze. What can individuals do to help support some common sense legislation?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because this is a point that I make quite frequently and just goes beyond everybody has a bit of a personal philosophy. And part of my personal philosophy and my approach to life is being an engaged citizen. And so being a citizen, it isn't just a matter of, well, it says nationality Canadian on my passport or something like that. It means that you are engaged in creating the society that we all live in. And so people are very keen on expressing things about their ideas about their freedoms, but they also have to play a role, have to accept responsibility for the way society is. And that, if you are going to play an engaged role, then you will, the benefit of that, I mean, you'll get to meet other people that are like-minded, but it also means you will have less frustration, because, I mean, I was more frustrated before I had this job, because although I was active in a number of ways, I didn't have some of the abilities to do things, to accomplish things that I have now. So I wake up every day and I'm energized because I see possibilities to do things. And some people, also, I'm not the only one who recognizes this. It's a common question, one of the common questions that I get asked at gun shows and other events where I appear is, well, what can I do? I'm not a chief firearms officer. I'm not a former professor. I'm not this. I'm just, they say just this.
Right.
But what can I do? Well, I always say there's three things that everybody should be doing. So, as a preface to that, the firearms community has to recognize that we're a minority. Okay, in Alberta, for example, the population's about 5 million, maybe 3.5 million adults. There's 360,000 people who have a possession and acquisition license. So that means we're about 10% of the adult population. Of course, some of the, that's a wife may use a husband's guns or vice versa. So there's more users, but it gives you some idea of order of magnitude. This shocks some people because when they're thinking, oh, all my friends own guns.
Sure.
So
that's right.
But that's not the overall reality. So as a very small minority, and one that is not well understood, because in today's society, even in Alberta, which is a very pro-gun province where firearms have always played a very important role in our traditions, in our history, in our culture, in our economy. Even here, we're a small minority, and a lot of people here, especially because most of the population growth has happened in our big cities, don't have much firsthand exposure. So what that means, because we're a minority and we're a misunderstood minority, that people either have no opinion about us or that are not a positive one, then we need to be highly mobilized. And, they may not 100% agree with every perspective that you have, but they'll recognize the legitimacy of your concerns. And that's a really important thing.
Yeah, I think the ability to articulate those concerns in a way that makes people aware of the broader implications. Like if they're concerned about the firearms confiscation, that's one aspect of the concern, but the other aspect is confiscating personal property just through order in council without due process, which could affect a broader population. Maybe that's one way to help win allies out there. I know the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses has taken the amount of money that's being spent as a way to try and win hearts and minds, saying, like, we don't care really one way or the other about the firearm side, but the amount of money that's being diverted into something that isn't showing any net positive effect, this should be addressed.
Well, there are aspects of the firearms issue that should be of concern to everyone, whether they own firearms or not. So you've alluded to one of them, which is the whole property rights issue. Property rights are not particularly well protected under Canadian law.
Right.
In fact, some would say they're barely recognized.
Right.
But that's an important thing for everyone, that if the federal government establishes the precedent that they can come along and take your property when you have done nothing wrong, and when you are posing no risk to society, and when they have presented no evidence that the property they want to take is of any danger to anyone, then that's a very dangerous precedent. And there are similarly many other aspects of federal firearms policy that people should be gravely concerned about. I expressed this right after I took office. I wrote a letter as early as November. I remember I took office in September,
Yes.
and I wrote it off as early as November. I wrote a formal letter, which then was, had to work its way through and get approval to go out, pointing out the huge opportunity cost. Opportunity cost it's a fancy economics term for what else could you do with the money?
Right.
Okay. And so, with this firearms confiscation plan, they've lowballed what the cost is going to be. And then they've also not recognized the alternative uses that money could fit. Like I said at the time, that I thought probably it would cost, a lowball estimate I thought would be a couple of $2 billion. And so far they've admitted to spending, I say admitted because who knows how much the actual figure, but they've admitted to spending $42 million and they've accomplished nothing. And so if they are to carry this out all across the country, then it would be an enormous expense when, we could use more police officers, more border agents. If you want to take a broader look at some of the underlying problems that generate violence, you could hire more social workers or addiction counselors or, people to get gang members out of that destructive lifestyle. So there's so many alternative uses of that money. And, I know there are certain politicians that believe there's a bottomless well that they can always just print more and the budget will balance itself.
Right.
But, that money has to come from somewhere. And so I think it's important to people recognize those alternative uses, and also the corrosive impact that programs like that are clearly useless and that are attacking people's property rights and their other freedoms. It's important that people recognize that those actions have consequences beyond finance. They undermine confidence in the system. And, every society, every country has to have, people have to have confidence in their government. And all around the world, we see that is being undermined, that people are lacking confidence. And there's all kinds of contributing factors there. Some point to social media or one thing or another. But governments have to look long and hard at themselves and see whether their actions are undermining public confidence or reinforcing it. And that's one of the things when I get philosophical, what I think about my job is I want to help restore confidence in government, not as the solution to everything, but we have to have some level of government. You can't have a society that's just total anarchy, people running around doing anything they want to anybody they want without regard for the consequences. But the way that we will get the kind of government that we need to have is when the people who are involved in government recognize their responsibility to help reinforce confidence in the system. And when they do that, then other people will not shy away from public service. They'll say, yeah, I want to help be part of the solution, not the problem. So I'm not just going to sit here and carp. I'm going to get involved and I'm going to help to create the kind of government that I want to see our country have. And it's only when we all do that we will get the kind of government we want to have. And I think that firearms owners are uniquely positioned to help in that process because they have been sort of the canaries in the coal mine for many of the attacks on individual liberty and on the credibility of our system, they're the ones who are suffering this first. And so they see it, and if they get involved, they can hopefully prevent this sort of corrosive rot from eating away at our system so much that it becomes irreparable. I don't think anybody wants to see that. But if we don't want to see it, we've got to play an active role in bringing about what we do want.
So I have some theories as to why firearms owners are the canary in the coal mine, so to speak. And I could let you know what they are, or do you have theories as to why that might be?
Well, I think if you look historically, the people who become the scapegoats for problems are typically people who are misunderstood. They might be misunderstood because they're from a particular ethnic or racial or religious group, or in our case, because they are members of a group who do an activity that many people don't understand. And so if you want to get something, if you want to eat away at something, it's easiest if you use precedents with people who are not well understood, because it's easier to make them scapegoats, right? And so since we're not well understood, it's easier to make us scapegoats. And so since people don't understand, well, why does somebody need to have a gun? Or if you have a gun, why would you need two? Well, people don't understand. I mean, my answer to, well, why do you need more than one gun is, well, why does a mechanic have more than one wrench?
That's right. Yeah, if one works.
They're tools. And, I mean, if you get a crescent wrench, it could do a lot of wrenches, but it's not as good as an actual wrench that's a 9/16 or an 11 millimeter or whatever. So that's why mechanics have lots of wrenches, and that's why people who want to do different things with guns have more than one gun, because different ones are good for different things.
Yes.
And so anyway, I think it's, at least partially that kind of the fact that we're, as people who are misunderstood, it's easier to scapegoat us. And once you establish that precedent, then you can gradually, expand it out. And next thing you know, the person who thought, oh, they'll never come for me, realizes that they are coming for you. And, like in the case of the gun grab, they go after rifles that, and other firearms. There's lots of things actually that aren't even in the modern sporting rifle category, but they go after modern sporting rifles because it doesn't look like a traditional gun. And why would you want to have that? Why do you need to have that? But if the federal government succeeds in establishing a system, a procedure, an infrastructure for confiscating those firearms after years of work and many, well, by that time it'll probably be at least hundreds of millions just to set up that infrastructure. Do you think they're only going to use it once? No, they'll have a list every year.
Right.
And so that's why this nefarious tendency has to be nipped in the bud. And, the other thing about this particular set of prohibitions was it broke all of the sort of unwritten rules, right? The unwritten rule was when they prohibited things, people would get grandfathered and they could at least keep their stuff.
Right.
And this violated that trust, so this set of measures was especially corrosive because it not only attacked people who were not contributing to the problem, but it also undermined all of the assumptions that people had made about how things would be done fairly. And so I think that was a major blunder. And the positive aspect of that, I suppose, is when people make really major blunders, it's easier for other people to recognize that they are blunders.
Sure.
And unfortunately, the people who were involved in that keep doubling down and thinking that well, if we just spend a little bit more money or a lot more money and more time, it's going to. But a bad idea is a bad idea. You dig yourself in a hole. The best solution is to stop digging, to abandon this whole idea, and recognize that this was a bad idea from the start and a bad idea poorly implemented.
Yeah, there's two thoughts on. They got the whole dig thought. Okay, best thing to do: stop digging that hole, find your way out. The other one is, okay, you found yourself into the darkest part of the forest, and they say, well, just keep pushing through it. There's going to be light at the end of the tunnel. And maybe they're thinking that. My theory on it is, I mean, the people who come up with these ideas and laws, there's going to be those very few who are just fanatical, and they're not open to reasonable persuasion. But most of them are going to be intelligent. Most of them can look at the numbers. Most of them can look at the statistics. And I've always thought it was more of a process of just being able to paint your opponent in a certain way and to use something that's in the public mind as perhaps a negative and say, we're going to do something about what the public perceives as negative. And our opponent over here, all they want to do is more negative, right? And I've always thought that was sort of that had to be, for the logical, common sense person, the reason why they'd be pushing something forward wasn't so much that they actually believe what they're doing is going to affect a positive change, because clearly the statistics and the outcome isn't showing that, but it's how to show the other person, paint them into a negative corner so that they can use that for their own political means. And recently I was asked to be on a podcast called the Horrible People Podcast, and Jen McDonald, Nee Gadbois, is the host of that one. She's putting it out. And I said, I love the name. I love what you're doing. That's going to be catchy. People are going to look at that. But what's your goal here? And she says, well, I want to show how the firearms community is shown in a negative light, and how the real story behind people. We're not horrible people, and we're members of the community. I said, well, that's all fantastic. But who's going to listen to this, right? And really, the people who are going to listen to it is the firearms community. And it's going to be a closed echo chamber of people chanting to themselves. And yeah, we're really good. There needs to be a means for the firearms community to reach the broader general public. And I think what you brought up there, it was what I brought up with her. I said, what if you, instead of just dealing on the gun side of things, dealt with othering and how people are othered? And you can have people from all different backgrounds, religious beliefs, ethnicities, whatever, that have been othered. And look at how the media portrays them in a politically expedient way. So now you're gaining the support of other groups. You're showing the process of othering and what that looks like. I might be biased, but I think the power of the collective masses through the media is way more powerful in affecting positive change than any legal recourse that we possibly have.
Yeah, well, I think that's helping other people outside the firearms community to recognize the importance of the negative precedents that are being set here is a very important thing.
Yes.
And so that's why in Alberta, I think, there are a lot of people who, the arguments are more receptive, more well received here in Alberta. And that's because many of the issues that are touched on are ones that are important to people, even if they're not affected directly by them themselves. So, one of the things about Alberta, we're known for our emphasis on property rights. And, people might wonder, well, why is that? And if you think about it, historically, it makes a great deal of sense, because when Alberta was being settled, how did we make our money? Well, agriculture, ranching, you need to have property. You've got land, you've got livestock, you've got equipment, and even if you're not ranching, but you're seeding crops, you need lots of equipment. So that property is your livelihood. There's a very direct connection between property rights and your livelihood. And then subsequently we had the oil boom and which has, of course, it has ups and downs over time. But in oil as well, your property rights and your the royalties that come off of that has helped to support the province. So property, the recognition that property is an important part of what enables us to be prosperous and also to live an independent, self-reliant lifestyle. That awareness is much stronger here in Alberta than it is in many other places. And so people may not recognize, or even if they're a gun person, they might say, well, yeah, but I don't have an AR-15. Well, yeah, but if they take that away, how long, before they take the other ones away, and then how long before they decide that, well, do you really need to be owning land? I mean, shouldn't that be owned by the state so we can feed the masses with it? Well, see how well I studied in the Soviet Union, so I know how well the whole collective farm thing works out.
Yes.
Yes. So, here in Alberta, people are much more receptive to these kind of concerns. And I think in that regard, we can be a beacon for the rest of the country. Because if you look across, I pretty much confine myself to my little bailiwick, which is the firearms issue. But across a wide range of issues, Alberta has not been afraid to challenge the received wisdom, the popular ideas of the day, and come up with ideas that often end up working better. And if they don't work better, then we abandon those and come up with an even better idea because we're not afraid to be different. And that comes from that independent mindset that we have because we've grown up as a society of people who were farmers and ranchers and people who were living on their own. You talk to some people, they live in some of the more remote parts of the province. They come to town every once in a while.
Yes.
But otherwise, I mean, the reason they're out there is they want people to leave them alone. And, that when the federal government keeps coming in and coming up with ideas that are intruding on their ideas, they've moved somewhere where their activities don't have any impact on anybody. They just want to be left alone. And when the federal government won't leave people alone, but keeps badgering them and coming after them, even when they're not doing anything, that really rubs Albertans the wrong way.
You are a very strong person and you stand up for what you know to be true, which takes a lot of courage. And I should imagine, do you find you get much flack or heat for stepping up and saying, I don't agree with this policy or I don't agree with this process. There's a better way that we can do it?
Well, surprisingly little, actually, because, so a couple of things. First of all, I mean, people might think, oh, Teri's so courageous, she does this. I have a mandate, so it says that I'm supposed to do this. Okay.
Sure.
Whereas if I was a federally appointed CFO, I'd have been fired within a week. Okay, for saying and doing the things that I do. But it's not just me. I have a whole team here that is helping me to establish a different way of looking at the firearms issue, a different way of relating to the firearms community. I have political support. All of the ministers, including our current Minister of Justice, Mickey Amery, they've all been very supportive. I've spoken to the Premier a few times. She's a busy lady, so I don't see her on a real regular basis. But every interaction I've had with her, she has expressed the strongest possible support. I know many of the members of Cabinet, and they also are very supportive. And so, it's a little easier to be courageous when you know you're not alone.
Sure. Yes.
So I don't want to overplay my valiant role in this in this whole thing. But I do have a lot of people who are very supportive, and the thing is that the people who recognize me, like one of the things that's really been a big change in my life is I spent most of my life in carefully cultivated complete obscurity. Okay? I didn't want to have anything to do with the media or anything like that. And then I got this job, and a large part of it involves talking to large numbers of people at public events, being on podcasts and all kinds of other things. I'm not a very technological person, so I don't even know all the kinds of things that I'm on or what they're supposed to be called. But if you Google my name and Chief Firearms Officer, you'll find lots of stuff there.
Yes.
And so I have people come up to me all the time and say, "Are you?" And yes. I mean, I was in Lethbridge last weekend for the Fort Whoop Up Rendezvous of the Alberta Black Powder Shooting Association.
Mm-hmm.
And I crossed the parking lot to go to the restaurant to have a bite to eat. And as I'm walking in, the guy says, "Are you?" I said, yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
I've been recognized on the street and many places. So it's not something that I would have chosen,
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of a cost that comes with the job. I mean, some people would find it nice because it soothes their ego, that, oh, yeah, people recognize me everywhere. But it means I got to be really good because, I'm in the public eye all the time. And so the people who recognize me are generally people who are supportive.
Mm-hmm.
I do get some people, even at gun shows, who are less supportive of, not always of firearms per se, but of, well, why do they need that kind of firearm?
Mm-hmm.
And, why do people need a handgun? Why do they need a modern sporting rifle? Why do you need that? And, I then work on converting them and pointing out, like at one time, the lever action repeating rifle was considered a revolutionary increase in firepower.
Yeah.
And so now it's considered a very sedate traditional kind of thing. So I spend time to convince people that this is something that it's not so scary, and if you if we let them get away with taking these away, then the thing that you like next is going to be on the block.
Yep.
So I spend a fair bit of time, at shows, because it's not that there's a large number of them, but sometimes it needs a little work.
Sure.
But that's part of my job. Like, basically, I view my time. I have to sleep a certain number of hours a day, but otherwise, all my time is this job. And so if it takes 15 minutes to convert a person, then 15 minutes it'll take. If it takes half an hour, if it takes an hour, I just keep plugging away at it one by one. You convert people to the cause, or at least to being indifferent. And another part of how I do that, I think I've shown you that I use a lot of my own firearms, and I have a lot of very interesting historical pieces, and I can comment on the history of them. This gun was purchased by the Kingdom of Siam to equip their officer corps, and this kind of thing. And so people then view these things as in a different way. They realize, yeah, there's a lot of history there. Or I point out, this one was owned by my grandfather, and then my father, and then me, or my father and my uncle, and then me. And, they realize that there's family history to it, that many of them are historical artifacts from history writ large, not just my family. And it changes people's perspective on things. And they recognize that, like with the modern sporting rifle, modern sporting rifles that were covered by the Order in Council, people don't realize how broadly that there were many other types of things that are by no means modern sporting rifles or black rifles, whatever you want to call them, that are covered by that. And that's something that the federal government has repeatedly done, is say, oh, we're banning this type of gun. Oh, we're banning, Saturday night specials, or we're banning this. And then they enact a law that actually covers a lot more.
Oh, yeah.
And so, that's there should be some kind of honesty in labeling law with respect to
Wouldn't that be nice?
With respect to laws. But it's part of my job to point these things out. And I when I went to Ottawa, I took pictures. They're talking about the handgun transfer freeze when they were going to entrench it in legislation through Bill C-21. I took pictures of my Peter Soley reproduction of a Harper's Ferry flintlock. And I said, and my cap and ball revolvers, and which are modern production. And I said, you realize that this handgun transfer freeze, this is what you're banning. This is pirate era technology.
And what did they say?
And well, a couple of them actually said, well, can I keep these pictures? So fortunately, I had made numerous copies.
Yes.
And I said, oh, of course,
Yes.
But the problem there is, a lot of things are decided in Ottawa by politics, not by rationality. And, I had people who would say, yeah, you pointed out good errors, good, serious problems with this. You've come up with good compromise solutions. Nothing that I proposed was radical. I wasn't, proposing open carry or something like that, which whether you like it or not, it would be you have to admit that would be a radical idea in Canada.
Yeah.
I wasn't proposing anything like that. I was saying, well, instead of this Olympic exemption, let the chief firearms officer decide which organizations can write these letters or something like little tweaks that could have made a big difference. But they weren't willing to even consider that. And that's what makes you realize that this has anybody who observes that should understand then that it's not these laws are not based around public safety.
Right. That
might be it's not to say that in the whole complex of Bill C-21 there's nothing that affected public safety.
Okay.
But that particular thing, how can you argue that banning this single-shot muzzle-loading flintlock is going to improve public safety? That saying that can't be transferred to anybody. And it's not prohibited. It just means that you can't transfer it to anybody. I mean, I'm fond of saying the last time somebody committed a crime with one of these, it was 1820 and the guy had a patch on one eye and a parrot on his shoulder, So, and then after doing it, he disappeared in a cloud of smoke.
Well, part of me would say, why would they proceed with those things? Would it be ignorance? But clearly it can't be ignorance if they're being educated otherwise. Is it ego? Is it arrogance? Is there a greater political motive behind it? What?
So I'm hopeful that when the Senate faces this kind of legislation again, that they will do the right thing and be willing to right some of the injustices that have been perpetrated by Bill C-21 and some of the other measures that have been introduced over the years. But, fundamentally, there are certain things that need to be done right away. Dropping the order in council, dealing with Bill C-21 and the handgun transfer freeze. But more fundamentally, we really do need to start again. Start with a blank slate. And I'm not saying that we get rid of all the laws and then reintroduce them. I'm saying, what the patchwork that we have now, where we've got Band-Aid on Band-Aid on Band-Aid, it's incomprehensible. Okay. And laws should be clear, should be simple, should be easy to administer, should be easy for people to understand. You shouldn't need to have a doctorate in law in order to figure out. And actually now the law is so convoluted that even if you get 3 doctors of law, you'll get 4 opinions on what it's worth.
That's right.
So we really need to start again. And after the positive aspect, I'm a silver lining kind of gal. And so the positive aspect of this is we've got experience now. We know what will work, what won't work. We can also look at what other countries have done and what worked and didn't work there. And we can just keep the core elements that have been proven to work or where there's at least a reasonable, plausible, logical case that they should work.
Sure.
And get rid of the things that are only expensive, ineffective, and undermine confidence in the system. I mean, when we have a classification scheme and I can show you two guns that are identical, you couldn't tell them apart, and one of them is restricted and one of them is prohibited, or one of them is one category and another is another category, then, that undermines people's confidence. People, the whole idea of laws is to prevent people from doing things that they might otherwise do,
right?
That they might have liked to do, but they realize, no, I'm not supposed to do that. Well, they're not likely to accept they're less likely to accept those kind of restrictions if those restrictions don't make any sense.
I agree. Yeah, I'm a firm believer that if you spend any time out in the wild, you'll realize that animals will take the least path of resistance, and humans are animals. We take the least path of resistance, the path of least resistance. And if we're able to make it easy for the politicians to make a decision, if we make it easy for the lawmakers to move forward in a certain direction, they're way more likely to move there. And there's a couple of examples where I've looked at different provinces sort of leading the way in certain areas and other provinces sort of copying their example. One of them was Nova Scotia. Chief Firearms Officer was introducing restrictions and amendments. I'm trying to think of what the word is on ranges. Conditions. Thank you. Conditions on ranges, and the New Brunswick CFO did a similar thing to one of the ranges. I think that was a Springfield range. Springfield range says, like, hold on, I don't get why we have these. We've operated so long, and in fact, these conditions that are being applied, they don't make sense. And they took him to court, and the New Brunswick CFO says, well, I'm just doing that because that's how the Nova Scotia CFO is doing it. And that's sort of that normative process, following the path of least resistance. Well, somebody else did it like that. And the other one would be in Ontario, Daniel Bolofsky. He was a Silvercore Club member, and the Chief Firearms Officer, Chris Wyatt at the time, says, no, we're not going to issue you an authorization to transport until you join a range in our province. And he's like, I've looked through the regulations. I've looked through everything. I don't see anything where you even get the authority to ask for that. And took them to court. One was appealed, lost, but the byproduct was that they no longer had to ask for range membership or club membership in order to have your restricted firearms license renewed and issued, or your ATT issued. I think was more the provincial purview there. And what I learned through that one was, it was, at least what was told to me, that was being run as a bit of a test case to see how they could bleed it out into other provinces. So I see this normative process. I see where the negative aspects of different policy are being just, well, buddy to my left or right, that's how they're doing it. Are you seeing that sort of process in some of the positive aspects? Are other provinces looking to Alberta and saying, hold on a second, Teri makes a good point over here. Maybe we should reevaluate?
Well, we have seen some of that because, for example, when they introduced the requirement that a seller validate the non-restricted, that they validate the possession and acquisition license of a buyer who wants to acquire a non-restricted firearm from them, or transfer in any way. If you're giving it to somebody, you're supposed to validate that their PAL is correct. It's one of those ideas that doesn't sound all that bad in principle, but the way they did it meant that it was pretty much impossible to do it at many gun shows.
Right.
And so we worked together with our federal partners in the registry to obtain these reference numbers for people. And there has been some element of spread of an idea like that. It's not challenging anything. Like, we're trying to say, like, if you want people to comply with this, let's make it easy, or at the very least possible for them to comply.
Yeah.
And that's the whole approach that we try and take, is to facilitate people's compliance. Okay. Like, we're not law enforcement.
Right.
We're not the ones who are going to go out and say, oh, you're not doing that, we're going to lay a charge against you. That's not our role. Okay. Our role is to administer the licensing scheme and the authorizations and so on, and to encourage compliance with that.
Right.
And encouraging compliance might be as simple as, another example from gun shows is people are supposed to secure their guns when they're on display. And so I don't go up and pound a table and say, hey, that gun isn't secured. I get a supply of free locks from the federal government. They're free in the sense, lots of people don't like the idea of anything from the government is free, but we obtain them without them charging us, so we can pass them on to somebody else without charging them.
Right.
And in that sense, at least people are getting something back for all the tax dollars they send to Ottawa. But, instead of saying, hey, you need to fix this situation, I go up to them and say, hey, I got a bunch of trigger locks. Would you like some? And that gets a better reaction from people, because people don't like to be told what to do. People don't like to have someone suggesting that they're doing things wrong. But if you can offer them something in a graceful fashion, then that helps. And it also encourages, sometimes people come to me and they say, if I do this, will this comply? Is this enough? And my reaction is, well, first of all, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't give you legal advice, right? I can tell you what the law says.
Yeah.
But I'm not a lawyer. My word, just because I say it, it doesn't mean that it's the law. Okay.
Yeah.
But what I can say is, here's what the law is. It kind of looks like that would maybe meet the law, but is that all you really want to do?
Just bare minimum?
Yeah. So, I mean, when I go out driving, when I do a lot of driving, okay, my goal is not simply to avoid committing vehicular homicide. Okay. That might be complying with the law. Okay. But I've set my standard a little higher than that.
Right.
Okay. And I don't maybe always meet it, but I want to be, a safe, courteous driver and, let people in and, this kind of thing. And so if we want to create a positive image of ourselves as a misunderstood minority, then it helps if we go above and beyond, And so does that meet legal minimum? Well, I'm not a lawyer, but it probably meets the legal minimum, but I'd suggest you do more, and so that's why, when you were talking about getting a club membership,
right?
It doesn't say in the law that you have to have a club membership.
That's right.
Okay. What it says is that a firearms officer can't issue this to you without, unless they are satisfied that you are acquiring it for the purpose that you state. Okay.
Right.
The easiest way to satisfy people that you want a gun for target practice is if you belong to a range where you would go to do target practice.
Sure.
But it's not the only way. There are other possibilities. But, I always tell people, well, no, we don't legally require that. It's not an absolute mandate. It will be the first question if we have to ask you, because the way the federal government has set things up now, a lot of applications are held up for what we call confirmation of purpose, right? So we will have to ask you that. We have to ask because it says we can't do this unless we're satisfied that this is the case. But, we aren't requiring this. But I always tell people, I would strongly suggest that everybody belong to at least one range. I belong to 3. Okay, even though I hardly get a chance to get out and shoot now because I work every weekend. But the reason for that is it's very simple. Our entire infrastructure is under attack. Like with the loss of handgun transfers, the number of handgun owners ratchets down. Then fewer people say, well, if I'm not shooting my handguns, why do I need to belong to a range? So some ranges have suffered significant losses in membership. That's exactly what the feds want.
Right.
Okay. And so we need to continue to support our infrastructure. And I made this point when I was arguing against Bill C-21 and its pernicious effects on public safety, because I said, like, ranges aren't only the place where firearms owners go to shoot their guns. In many places, that's where, like, your armored car guards go, where
Yes.
your police go,
Yep.
where, people who, wildlife officers and so on, they need to have a place to shoot.
Mhm.
And right now, I mean, Alberta's a very big place. You don't realize how big it is until you start driving around here. And even though I said, like, I've been up as far as Fort Mac, there's a whole bunch of Alberta that's further north than that.
Yep.
Okay, including a couple of ranges that are in the very far north, almost to the Northwest Territories. And so I hope to get there one day, because I want to visit everything. I want to visit every business. I want to visit every range. I want to be in places where everybody at least has a chance. If they want to talk to me, they can come and talk to me.
Very
okay.
cool.
But those many places, the police don't have a range locally. Like if for their annual qualification, they may have to travel hours and hours and hours to go somewhere. So they'll use the local range. Well, if the local range has to close down because they don't have enough members, then that's going to negatively affect public safety.
It will, yes.
And because I don't know about you, but anybody that is officially carrying a gun, I want them to be as proficient as possible.
Better believe it.
And so, we need to ensure that there are, that these ranges stay open, and it's a small cost, I mean, getting an associate membership, or, there are many there's still rural ranges, some of them where it's under $100. Not a lot of them now because costs go up, but there are, if we don't support those ranges, it's going to come back to haunt us, because the whole model of firearms ownership in Canada, right, like it or not, is based around sporting use. And if there's no place where people can go and use them for sport, then people would say, why do you have them?
Right.
And then they come for you.
Right.
So, it's really important that we support ranges. And so I always tell people, we don't legally require it. We encourage it. And part of the reason why is it's your way of helping to support the future of firearms ownership in Canada.
That's a good point. You brought up a couple things here. One of them is about going above and beyond, and it brings to mind one of our instructors. He uses the acronym CYA, and he's like, ask the class, you know what that stands for? And I was like, oh, yeah. And he says, can you articulate? Right? Oh, okay. If you're pulled over, can you articulate? If you had to stand in front of a trier of fact, can you easily articulate? And if the answer is you have to do a song and dance and break out the nitty-gritty fine print, well, maybe it's going to be a lot easier if you go above and beyond. It's easy to articulate. So
it's also, like, people are sometimes critical because not everybody who's responsible for aspects of the firearms control system, whether it's the regulatory part or the enforcement part, not everyone is an expert in all of these things. Right. And, most of us, because of our pattern of our past, our pattern of usage and our interests, we tend to know a lot about a few things.
Yeah.
And not always a whole lot about other things.
Right.
And, I know more about firearms than most people do, but there are areas about firearms that I don't know anything about, or very little. And so that's one of the reasons also why I go to events, so that I can learn more about it. I can see how things get done, and see how people use things in competitions, and educate myself. So, education isn't a fact; it's a process. And so I'm continually learning new things all the time about how. When I was at the Black Powder Shooting Association, how do people deal with misfires or hang fires and things like that? And, in a practical sense, not theoretically, but seeing exactly what they do and what tools they use and so on and so forth. It helps me to understand things.
Mm-hmm.
When will I use that? I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
but it's all part of my toolkit, and then, it's part of that. I guess that's part of the reason why you go to Canadian Tire and they sell you a kit that has 87 wrenches in it. And,
Yeah.
and am I ever going to need a 6mm wrench? I don't know, but I'll have one
That's
for
right.
the day when it.
But I want it. That learning process, there, as I've been doing this since about 94, started teaching in 94, the basic firearm safety course when it came out. I incorporated Silvercore in 03 and started the firearms business license. Before that, I had sole proprietorship, Silvercore Gunworks, and I was doing repair and maintenance, extended work for law enforcement and armored car companies. And then every Joe Blow and coming in with a $100 gun they bought at a gun show that they wanted to shoot like $1,000 gun, but they only wanted to spend $50. But been doing it for a little bit, and there's been a number of different interesting learning pieces. One of them, so I've been asked for both Crown as well as defense side to opine on different firearms or weapons related issues, and they go through the process and qualify you as a subject matter expert for that case on that day for that one particular area. And then even if you meet that qualification, then it's how much weight's going to be ascribed to this opinion. There was one that was ease of conversion. There was a firearm that was being imported and they got the AOK, and the firearms program turned around and says, no, it's easy to convert to full auto. And so I was asked to come in and take a look at this gun. And I looked at it, and within about a minute of taking it apart and looking how it operated, I figured out how you can make this thing go full auto. And so my testimony was, because you're not an expert for the person who's hiring you, you're an expert for the court to provide them with the best possible decision. My expert testimony was, it's pretty damn easy to convert, right? However, a lot of the things that are being said about where it's being made, how it's being put together, and that's completely false. And here's the information, and I can show it to you, right? As I testified first, I get to watch the firearms program expert testify, and I've actually testified. He's been on a different side on other issues, and I watch him, and the only thing I could come to mind was he's lying. He's lying through his teeth. He can't be that ignorant to what the facts are. And if he'd only heard my testimony, he wouldn't have had to lie, right? And so I was getting all worked up and looking like, how can somebody go up there and do this? And at the end of the day, what I learned was that the recourse for this decision that was being made on the firearm is similar to the recourse for decisions for a lot of firearms issues. And it was, I think they called it a judicial review. And it doesn't review whether or not the end outcome, the end conclusion that in this case, the firearms program came to, doesn't review whether that was the right decision or wrong decision. It reviews if they followed the proper steps to get to that decision. So that was a big learning moment for me. Even if 100% you're right on one thing, and in that particular instance, I agree. It was easy to convert. I mean, it met the definition. But even if you are 100% right and the opposing side comes up with something that you know to be 100% wrong, your recourse legally on that is rather constrained. And if they can prove that they followed all the right steps to get there, that final decision stands. And that leads into a moratorium that was put on instructors in British Columbia, making new instructors. And I didn't think that was right. Other instructors says, Travis, what are you doing? This is a gold mine. I mean, why would you want more instructors out here? And I said, I don't look at it like that. This isn't my main source of income. I'm more diverse than this, and I don't like the idea of limiting legal access to firearms and the safety training and all the rest. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to hire a lawyer, and I'm going to challenge this moratorium. Lawyer turns around and looks at it and says, okay, got your money here, but just to let you know, I've done some research, and there actually isn't a legal framework to compel a firearms officer or chief firearms officer to make new instructors in the way that there would be a legal framework for other civil servants. The approach that we're taking on this one is off. We'll be lucky if they don't see costs, right? It was dropped without costs, and I was mentioning this to some buddy I know who's in the media, and he's like, why are you pursuing it? I said, this is a public safety thing. If this is supposed to be safety training, and it's supposed to help the general public, how can they limit this? He's like, well, I'll give him a phone call. So here's that learning process. He phoned up on the Friday. By Monday, the Firearms program said, we've decided to change our approach, and we're opening up the, we're stopping the moratorium on instructors, and we're going to make some new instructors. So what I'm trying to get across in this sort of long-winded thing here is there's a lot of people in the firearms community that might not actually realize the amount of agency that they have if they're able to show the easy path and be vocal in a positive way towards the issues that they're experiencing. If they say, that's it, we're going to court, I got deep pockets and we're going after this, you're probably looking at a losing prospect. But if you take an approach of raising public attention towards these matters, I've found by and large using that approach has pressured a positive outcome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all of these issues, we need to kind of follow multi-pronged strategies.
Okay.
And part of the thing you touched on when you were talking about the number of instructors and that sort of thing, every province deals with the whole issue of instructors. I'm the one who has to actually sign people's certificates saying that they're doing it, but we have a partner, Heya, that does that at the moment. They're the ones who well, for quite a few years, actually, not just this moment. They're the ones who've done it for quite a long time. And we work closely with them on that. And so other provinces do it differently. They have one of them people in their firearms office who is responsible for managing the instructors. We have a couple of our firearms officers who are qualified instructors here as well. But the thing is, having, one prong of our strategy has to be to increase our numbers. And you can't become a legal firearms owner unless you can take the course.
Right.
So we've got to make sure that that course is available to everybody. So in the province of Alberta, it has to be available to everybody from the U.S. border to the Northwest Territories, from BC to Saskatchewan. It has to be available to you whether you're old, young, whether you are living with a disability, whether you are a newcomer or someone who's long established, whether you're Indigenous, whether we want to make sure that that's available to everyone so that everyone has the ability to join us in our struggles. And that, I think, is very important because a lot of people have the mistaken idea that firearms owners are just a bunch of angry old white guys.
Sure.
Okay.
Gouge is what I've heard. Grumpy old white dudes. GOWD.
So, but the thing is, and we may have an element of that. I can't deny in our cadre, but many of my firearms officers are firearms enthusiasts. I have a couple of the women who work here as firearms officers who are very avid hunters, and we have, when I attend events, I have people from all different communities, from the South Asian community, Filipino community, Chinese Canadians, and Indigenous peoples, and of all the different groups. And and young and old. So at the Black Powder event, there was a lot of people who were 70s, 80s, even one in their 90s. But there were also a couple of teenagers.
Right.
And it was very interesting because you know what the other hobby of these two teenage ladies was?
What?
Roller derby.
I love it. I love it. Yeah.
I didn't even know they still did roller derby, but they were showing me the pictures of that.
That could be a brutal sport.
Yeah. Well, it's but it shows the diversity, and that's what we need to. We need people to understand, and it will help us when we go to talk to different groups, if people understand that diversity, that it isn't just a bunch of angry old white guys from rural areas, that we've got young urban women, that we've got
Sure.
people from all different ethnic, racial, religious groups that are part of that firearms community. And that opens people's minds. Oh, I didn't realize that you were just like everybody else, except that you have this particular interest. And so the more we can expand our numbers and the more we can expand into groups that were not perhaps traditionally strongly inclined towards firearms ownership, the stronger our cause is going to be.
So I've always looked at the firearms program. You brought this up before, that you guys aren't the enforcement body. The firearms program isn't, but they're the ones that help with I've looked at them as facilitators, essentially. How do you get you from point A to point B? And for a number of years, dealing with the BC CFO's office and dealing with other provinces, that really was the way. It's like, hey, I'd like to do this. Hey, I want to open up a business that does this. How do I do that? Can you guide me through it? And at some point, things kind of changed. And it looks like it's swinging back again, but things changed to a point where it was, rather than being the facilitator, it was a person who tells you no, right? I'd like to do this. Well, you can't. Well, let me take a look at your business plan first, and nope, doesn't meet it. Well, hold on a second. Shouldn't it be the other way around? Shouldn't you say, in order to get there, your business plan has to have these steps? If you got that, great, fantastic. If it doesn't, and I've looked at that in like ATC issuance, I've looked at that in business conditions and licensing. But in talking with you and looking around the office and seeing where you're going here, it looks like you're taking a very grassroots approach and a facilitating approach to helping people get forward. I'm wondering, is that the trend within the general firearms program to turn around and say, look, how do we facilitate? Because I was told by some past officers that on some issues, they had a mandate to deny, to do what they could. ATCs is one of them. I was told we've got a mandate to try and limit that. The other one was business licenses in the film industry. We've got a mandate to try and crack down and not allow people to get those. Have you heard of those mandates? Have you seen a shift towards how do we facilitate more?
Well, first of all, the one place that I can definitely speak to is here. And, our approach, like with ranges, for example, what we say is, I'm stealing a line that was come up with by our senior range firearms officer. You want to have a safe place to shoot. We want to give you a safe place to shoot, so, and that means, we have a certain amount of expertise in making sure that certain risks that you might not have thought of are covered off.
Sure.
Okay. So, because we have the benefit, and this is part of the benefit of being part of the whole Canadian Firearms program, we've got the experience of everything that's happened all across the country for decades. Okay. So, we try and take that facilitative approach, and it pays off. This past weekend, when I mentioned I was at this Black Powder Rendezvous, one of the participants there came up to me and said, well, I want to start a gun show in such and such a place. How do I do that? And so I said, well, here's my contact information. Contact me. I'll put an officer in touch with you. But here's a couple of key things that you want to think about, security and different issues like that, and some practical things, like get yourself a roll of black plastic bags so that people aren't walking out across the parking lot with a naked gun, to quote an old movie.
Leslie Nielsen.
that sort of thing. So, and so I'm hoping that he's going to follow through on that, and we'll have another gun show. Because the more places there are where people can be socialized into the law-abiding, responsible firearms culture, the better off not only we will be, but the entire society will be. And so, that's kind of the approach that we have taken. I think that in other provinces, a lot of times it depends on, like, every province is its own kind of unique animal.
Mm.
There are certain efforts, when we meet at, there are a couple of meetings of chief firearms officers each year, and they often will attempt to develop a consensus around how we should deal with something.
Mm.
And my response to that has generally been that that seems to make sense to us. We'll probably do that, but I'm not going to bind my hands.
Right.
Okay, because if there's a situation that comes up where that doesn't work, I'm not going to be bound by
Policy.
by some group of people who sat around a table, at 3:00 in the afternoon, and were looking at their watches and decided no.
Yeah.
So I'm not suggesting there's anything
No.
wrong with how that body of people is deliberating, but
Well, the intentions are good behind that.
I mean, one of the things that really bothers me. So there's I just went through the roof when I saw this at first. Was the commissioner's report on firearms, and a couple of years ago there was a line, and it might still be there. I don't know. I look at the tables of numbers.
Yes.
I'm a numbers person. I don't read all the footnotes. But it said that the principles of the Canadian Firearms Program included public safety and standardization. And there were about 3 or 4 of them. But putting standardization in the same level as public safety, I tend to think of it more as, I would like to see more ability for the firearms officers across the country to reflect the peculiarities of that province. Okay, and so if that has another benefit to the whole country, that if we come up with a good idea here in Alberta and we show that it works, first of all, we need to have the freedom to do that.
Right.
Okay. But if we have that freedom and we do something different and we show that that works, then it's like what they call a natural laboratory. We can then say, hey, I know you guys are doing it differently, but we did it this way, and look at the great results we got.
Right.
Right. And so, talking about our outreach program, I did a presentation at one of the recent chief firearms officers meetings about our outreach program, talking about the benefits that we get from being out there and talking to people. And, others would like to do that. There's a lot of them. In many cases, it comes down to the hard matter of a budget.
Sure.
Like if you're in one of the smaller provinces that doesn't have much money and you're not viewed as a high political priority, they don't give you any money, and then you can't go out and be at gun shows.
Right.
Here in Alberta, people have recognized that this is an area where we can take the lead in policy, that it's an important area to, I think there's a widespread political consensus that this is an area that is of particularly critical importance in Alberta to our culture, our way of life, our traditions, and our economy. I've touched on that a couple of times, but the economic aspect is quite important, and it's not just the jobs of people who are working in gun shops or at a commercial range or something, but the health of our agricultural industry and our whether it's ranching or farming, and forestry, and then there's the whole tourism and outfitting aspect of it. There's a big economic footprint, and if there's an area where somebody has been raising livestock for 150 years, and suddenly they're no longer allowed to defend their livestock against predatory animals, and they have to abandon their farm, that's an economic loss.
It's huge.
It's also a huge loss to the traditions of our province, which are, have their origins in those kind of industries. It's a huge loss to that family. You know, imagine you've got had a family ranch that's been there for 150 years and it has to be wound up because of some misguided edict coming out of Ottawa. You know, we really need um, to emphasize the economic impact of some of these things as well. And fortunately, here in Alberta, that's recognized. You know, we have a provincial government that is very keenly attuned to the different aspects of our province, which have, I mean, increasingly we do have, you know, high tech people in this building that we're in. You know, is high tech place. There's lots of high tech businesses here, but geographically, a very large part of the province is reliant on agriculture, resource industries, whether it's forestry or mining or whatever. Who knows? I mean, even if I don't really know how, I'm not an expert on things like solar energy, but, you know, you never know. If we have an area where there's a big, what do they call them? Solar power farm.
Yeah, and all the birds coming through.
You know, they may have the bears might like that area or something, and they need maintenance, so people have to be safe.
Yeah.
So there's a wide range of areas where the firearms issue is of critical economic importance to Alberta, and I would, you know, I think that's recognized by the current government. I would hope that at some point it would be, you know, my hope is at both the provincial and federal level that eventually the firearms issue would not be a political issue. Public safety should not be a political issue. Everybody wants public safety. And if we establish a system that is based on data, on science, on mutual understanding, and developing cultures of respect from citizens between each other and between citizens and government, then this should not be a political issue. I mean, when we need changes in rules, we may need to have a vote by politicians.
Sure.
But there should be consensus on these things. And, you know, I would be, if there are politicians, federal, provincial, municipal, who want to be educated on this to really understand what's going on, you know, I'm here. I'm willing to meet with people to help people to understand. And I think, like, part of the reason why is I'm very proud of what we're doing. I'm proud of the work of my people here. So whether it's the day-to-day, you know, decisions that they make on renewing or granting firearms licenses, or whether it's the outreach that my people are doing, I'm very proud of what they do. And I'm proud of the initiatives that we're coming up with to address issues like firearms misuse in domestic violence, or mental health issues, or things like that. We want to face those issues head on and develop realistic, workable, data-based solutions to those problems. And when we do that here in Alberta, then I'm going to be preaching those as we develop and get more and more ideas there. I'll be out preaching to have those adopted all across the country, because our goal is to have public safety and a thriving firearms community, and those two are not just compatible, they're mutually complementary and reinforcing.
100%. Do you want to hear some questions from the public?
I'm always willing to listen.
Let's see what we got here. What are the trends, vibes relating to ATCs, PAL, hunting, sport shooting, industry? It's a pretty broad question. Mm-hmm. Do you see any trends emerging in the industry or in the firearms community?
Well, I see both troubling and promising trends.
Okay.
And the troubling trend that I see is, you know, a lot of people, they get discouraged because right now there's been a number of completely unjustified attacks on the firearms community, and it just wears people down. Okay. And people say, oh, should I stay in business? Should I keep my guns? Should I give up hunting? You know, different things like that. And on the other side, though, personally, I'm, maybe it's because I'm a glass half full kind of person, but I see tremendous opportunity because the failure of many of these misguided proposals is becoming increasingly evident. And there's a reasonable probability that after the next election, Ottawa might become more amenable to listening to reason. And so I'm actually very positive. I try to encourage people to give them hope. I try to encourage people to ride out this rough patch because there's a better day ahead.
I like that. Is your work different today from when you started? And if so, how?
Well, we are kind of at an inflection point now because when we started, we were scrambling. Okay. When I took over the office, I was only hired like a couple of weeks before the office opened. I was not, although I was a member of the Alberta Firearms Advisory Committee. I was part of the recommendation to take over the office provincially, but then I wasn't involved in the lead up to that. And so I had no idea what I was getting into. It was like, diving blindfolded off a platform and not knowing whether it's 600 feet down onto solid concrete or 6 inches down into a nice soft mattress. What's it going to be? It was a lot closer to 600 feet down to concrete. But as we started off, we were scrambling. We had an office that had furniture but not much else. I had half a dozen people with me the first day, and in very short order, we got ourselves up and running, figured out what needed to be done. That enabled us to apply for the funding that we needed to take over more of the operations from Miramichi, because I think things are best done close to the people. Like, this is an information business. All the information is here.
Yes.
So we're now at kind of an inflection point because we're almost fully staffed, and those staff now were in the intensive training phase so that over the next number of months, we'll be able to take over most of the work that Miramichi does for Alberta, and do that here. I've always said that this made sense because I'm responsible for the administration of the Canadian Firearms Program in Alberta.
Right.
But I didn't have control over most of it because most of it was being done in Miramichi. And I had in theory, you could say I had control of it because for the people in Miramichi, when I've met some of them, they're dedicated, great folks, they work hard, but I have no idea what's going on because I would have to sign a designation order saying that, Bill Smith or Jasbir Singh or whoever is authorized to act on behalf of Alberta, but then I had no idea of what they were doing. And so by having everything here, we will know. And then, I meet people, as I mentioned, I meet people all the time. I'm arm's length away from them. I'm dealing directly with them. I want to be able to tell them that I will fix their problem and be able to say, okay, Bill or Mary or whoever, fix this person's problem. And can't do that if they're 3,000 miles away and I don't know what's going on. So we're at that inflection point now where we've achieved our critical mass. There's a couple of key hires that we're still doing. We need some training. But over the next little while, we will really be hitting our stride. So it's like we've been doing all the training, and now we're going to be in the Olympics. The Olympics are just a couple of months away, and then we'll be able to really hit our stride.
Very exciting.
I'm proud of how we've dealt with the challenges up to now, but I'm extremely excited by how we're going to deal with the expanded opportunities that achieving our full maturity will bring.
I like that. I have my own questions, but I'm going to save those to after. I'm going to go through the ones to the public here.
Sure.
What's the latest on the handgun confiscations post Bill C-21? How do the seizures actually happen after a handgun owner dies? Who gets a letter? Who goes to collect the gear? How much of a priority is this?
So, first of all, I'm sure many of your listeners would already know, but there is no specific confiscation plan,
right?
The same way that there is supposed to be one for the Order in Council firearms,
right?
Okay, and I say supposed to be one because I haven't seen much evidence of there being a concrete plan. But anyway, I think that what that question is designed about is what happens to guns when somebody dies? What happens to handguns when somebody dies? So right now, the formal options for someone are very limited because you could sell them to a business, but most businesses don't need more handguns. You could sell them to an exempt individual, but there's only a handful of those. You could have them deactivated, but that's basically destroying their value. And I mean, I hate to see that. So, I actually have a little sign that I put when I do have a couple of deactivated guns in my collection. They were deactivated before I got them.
Sure.
I wasn't responsible for their deactivation. But my little sign says, in order to comply with Canada's barbaric laws requiring the desecration of precious historical artifacts, sadly, this firearm has been deactivated.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's that. You could just surrender them and have them destroyed. None of those are reasonable options. None of the things that the federal government says are options are really options, But and I can't counsel people.
No.
Since I'm not a lawyer, I can't counsel people on exactly what they should do. However, I would point out that it's our understanding that the executor of an estate has the reasonable period of time to deal with the resolution of the estate. And a reasonable period of time is not well defined in law.
Right.
But it's not weeks or days. It's probably measured in years. And I think there is a reasonably good chance that after the next election, this will become significantly less of a problem than it is now.
I agree. What about exporting? Is exporting in the cards?
Yes.
Okay.
It's possible. The problem is that most guns aren't worth enough.
Right.
Like if it costs you, there are many companies that do this, okay, and I'm not trying to undercut their business or anything, but if it costs you $300 to ship a gun out of the country and the gun's worth $400,
yeah,
how much of an option is that?
Yeah.
So the federal government is fond of saying, oh, you've got all these options. Here's like your 5 options. Well, that's like saying, well, you can cut off your hand, or you can cut off your foot, or you can cut off your nose, or you can cut off your ear. None of those are really options that I want to entertain.
Right. I agree. That's a good way to put it. What's the latest on the rifle and shotgun confiscations? May 2020, OIC has the Federal Department of Public Safety been in contact? Is the plan advancing or stalled? What's Alberta's position?
Okay, so first of all, Alberta's position from the very outset, and not just my position or not just our office's position, but our provincial government's position as articulated by Cabinet, has been that we are absolutely opposed to this because it's a violation of people's property rights, and it is a completely useless waste of valuable taxpayer resources. Okay. Now, somebody, when they watch this, they'll probably say, well, but property rights aren't protected in Canada. Well, maybe not, but they're not well protected in Canada. But so people would say, are you really violating them? But personally, I don't believe that governments give us rights.
I agree.
To me, depending on whether you're religious or not, your rights are either God-given or innate.
Right.
Governments can recognize them or protect them, but they don't give you rights.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But that's a bit of a philosophical, digression. So we've always been very strongly opposed to this. And that has played itself out in a number of ways. So, for example, a previous Minister of Justice and Solicitor General issued, I'm not sure what they're called, protocols or something like that, indicating that no provincial resources were to be used, no provincially funded resources were to be used, and things like that. So that has limited the options for the implementation of this program.
Mm-hmm.
But it is not considered legally legitimate for the province to we can't obviate a law. We can't
Right.
say this law is invalid here. Okay, that's but doesn't mean we have to help.
Right.
And so that's what these protocols help to do. Also, it's my responsibility as Chief Firearms Officer, and particularly under the Alberta Firearms Act, to ensure that anything that is done safely. And so we have the power to regulate seizure agents. There's a fancy legal definition, but basically that would be anybody who is involved in some kind of confiscation program like this. We have the power to regulate them to ensure that whatever activities they conduct are conducted in a lawful and safe manner. And, sometimes my federal counterparts say, well, surely, we're going to do it in a safe way. That's, why would you need to have the power to regulate that? But then they come up with the idea of collecting them in post offices
Right.
that have locks that a 6-year-old could break through.
Yeah.
And so, it is an important thing. And we can't say that, no, you can't do this, but we can say that if you're going to do this, we're going to make sure that Albertans get treated fairly, and we're going to make sure that the way you do it doesn't expose Albertans to undue risk. And fortunately, I think, they have not yet figured out a way to do it that would meet even minimal public safety requirements. So the way I see things playing out, I don't have a crystal ball. Neither the federal prime minister nor any of their cabinet whisper little nothings into my ear. But the way I see it playing out is that I think it's likely that they'll be, by the time of the next election, they'll probably be able to do something on the collection of business inventories, because there are many businesses that have been sorely hurt by having to maintain stocks that they can't sell. They're paying interest on money for years. Interest rates have been high, and so that's been a burden for them. But and for many businesses, not all of them, but for many businesses, it's inventory. But individuals, it's a whole different thing, because we are much more attached to our stuff. The things I have are not just inventory to me. They are historical artifacts. They're treasured heirlooms. They have a significance that goes well beyond their monetary value. And so we want to make sure that anything that the feds do, they do in a safe manner. They haven't come up with a way to do that, but I think that I don't think they'll be able to make much progress by the next election on actually collecting them from individuals.
I agree.
And in some respects, and here I'm going into, I give lots of caveats. I'm not a political analyst. Okay, I'm not. I don't have a doctorate in political science, but I would think that there's a certain confluence of interests, because it probably makes sense for them to not complete it by the time of the next election, because it will be troublesome. It will cause friction and negative publicity
Sure.
if they try to push it by the time of the next election.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Here's one from a business owner, and he says one thing that would be really good is an API or API access to PALs so that we can auto-verify when we ship regulated items. Has there been any chat that you've heard of implementing sort of APIs to cross-check people's licenses so that businesses can be compliant?
Well, businesses have access to a system for verifying that people's PALs are valid now. I mean,
but it's not a application protocol interface or whatever the thing calls.
I don't understand that technology.
Fair enough. It's something that'll allows the back end to talk without a human having to be on the front end searching it.
I have not seen anything in their plans, and we do get updates on things, but they are expanding they're expanding the capabilities of automation in the system all the time. Like you can now apply for your PAL online and many other things you can apply online. But on the other hand, anything that would make it possible to make it easier on the firearms community isn't always. I mean, some of these things. I mean, it does make it easier when people can apply for PALs, but the specific objective of making life easier isn't necessarily one of the top priorities, I think, in those efforts. So the short answer is, I've given you a long answer. Now I'll give you the short answer is, I don't know. I don't think so.
Fair enough. What are your thoughts on auditory health / medical benefits of sound moderators / suppressors? Police use them, is what the question was.
Well, from the very beginning, I've been a strong believer that we need to consider legalizing suppressors, and not just for the reason that was stated. If you visit any area where there's a lot of old timers, many of them started using firearms before hearing protection. A lot of them have hearing issues, and there are times when hearing issues are not easily dealt with by earmuffs or things like that. So there's that issue. The hearing health is certainly an important part. But another part of this issue, I think, is preserving our ranges, because ranges that are close to cities increasingly are under pressure because the city grows out to where the range was. It was originally in an isolated area. Nobody cared about the noise. Now there are houses that are close by. If people were using suppressors, the noise would be a much less significant issue. I think that probably we need to figure out what kind of a regulatory framework would be around them. I probably wouldn't favor just removing all restrictions on them until we at least studied whether that was going to be a good thing. But definitely I think that they should play a role in firearms usage in the future in Canada. They do in many other countries, including countries that have even more restrictive firearms laws than we do.
Yeah, England is one of them. I remember I was in Scotland. I was walking from Inverness to Loch Ness. I wanted to check out, go for a swim in their cold lake over there, and I saw this guy in his field, and I was like, hey, I recognize what he's got set up over there. Looks like a little covered shooting area, and he was shooting. I thought, I'll go chat with him, and he had a suppressor on his rifle. And so, Canada, those are illegal. He's like, really? I can't shoot my rifle without it here because I live in X proximity to my neighbors, and the laws say I have to have it. Interesting. There's one. What are your thoughts on the utility of the AR-10 ESP, especially, I guess, as a SIG 308 offering in wildlife conservation officer use? Many Western Canadian provinces switched to them beginning in 2018. And I think this individual is probably looking at the comparing and contrasting. I'm going to go out on a limb here. How ARs apparently aren't suitable for hunting or wildlife control, yet the provinces are using them for wildlife control within their government agencies.
Yeah. Well, so I guess on the broader point, I'm not always. I'll confess that I'm not always up on exactly the latest models
Sure.
of whatever
Yeah.
everything is. But on the basic point, what really determines how suitable a firearm is for a given purpose is primarily its caliber and secondarily things like weight and length and
Sure.
that sort of thing. And so the idea that some bureaucrat in Ottawa is better able to decide what is useful or suitable for someone in the field to use, I find to be a difficult proposition to support. It's the people who are in the field know what they need, and they should be allowed within reason to choose the tools that are going to most appropriately help them to do the job, to continue with our little analogy that we were using before. The last thing a mechanic needs is somebody reaching over his shoulder and saying, "Oh no, you really should be using the closed end wrench, not the open ended wrench in that application." Well, let the person who's doing the job figure it out.
Yeah. Here's one from a business. Just says, clarified legal status of guns not listed in OIC, but the FRTs changed after the fact. Also, guns that have no FRT, period. For example, no legal document states that ATRS Modern Series, Daria Mark 12, and the Maccabee Defense are prohibited, or a reason why, though the FRT got changed.
If I could answer questions like that, so part of the federal government has gone completely out of control on these issues. And so, it's one thing to pass a regulation that says these specific things are prohibited. You can agree with it, you can disagree with it, but at least you know what they have said is okay and not okay. But the way they have been willy-nilly trying to expand the list of prohibitions, I've heard the latest number I've heard is that it's grown from the original 1,500 to 2,000. And it wouldn't surprise me if it's even more. It's not how you should be making law. And I'm neither a lawyer nor a judge, nor certainly not a Supreme Court justice, and it may take that to come up with a definitive answer to that question. But it's not how we should be making law.
I think one thing that became really clear was, I think it was Murray Smith during the legal challenge that came up. I was asked to opine on a few issues and had to sit in on the court proceedings, but he repeatedly kept saying, FRTs have no bearing in law. They're not. It's something that the Firearms program makes for so that they have a reference of things, but it is not designed specifically to influence law, to classify. That's done by politicians. So that was something that he mentioned on a few different occasions. What are your thoughts on ATCs as well as wilderness carry of non-restricted firearms? I'm not sure quite. Maybe I'll just stop it as, what is your thoughts on ATCs, because wilderness carry of non-restricted firearms is kind of a moot point.
Yeah. So obviously, so authorizations to carry, there's sort of three broad areas, well, maybe four. So there's one area is authorizations to carry for defense of life, and those are exceptionally hard to get in Canada because the legal bar is extremely high, and very soon I probably will not have any control over that at all because Bill C-21 centralizes that power with the Commissioner of Firearms. And so as far as I have seen, they haven't come out with the procedures for that, but I think that was a disastrous decision because the whole point of that in the current framework is that the need must be imminent. There must be imminent risk to life. Well, if the risk is imminent, that's just the answer has to be imminent.
Right.
Not depend on going up a chain of authority many levels high to the Commissioner of Firearms. And I don't know the background really of the current Commissioner of Firearms, but one previous one, of course, is well known for having said she knew nothing about the law
Right.
in this area.
Right.
So I don't see what the benefit is of introducing those many levels of additional scrutiny to a process that was already very onerous.
Mm-hmm.
The authorizations to carry for like armored car guards and
Sure.
people like that, that's a relatively routine and uncontroversial
Yep.
area. Although I would mention when we took over, the previous federal office had not done any of the renewals of those. So we had to immediately launch. They all come due at one time of year.
Mm-hmm.
And if we had not launched a crash campaign to get them done in just a matter of a couple of weeks, all the movement of cash in the province of Alberta would have ground to a halt, as with likely significant negative effects on the province as a whole.
No kidding.
So, when we're talking about economic importance of firearms, there's a very good example.
Mm-hmm.
And so we prioritize that practically above almost everything else in order to not shut down the economy.
Mm-hmm.
So then there's the trappers. That's a relatively uncontroversial thing too. And the wilderness carry is a bit broader. With the trappers, generally, that's people sort of self-identify. They've taken a trapper course, they've got a
Yep.
trap line, and so on and so forth. The one that poses some more difficult challenges is the authorization to carry in the sort of wilderness protection against wildlife.
Yeah.
And so the key thing about that is that it does have to be professional. Okay,
Right.
like it's occupational, so it might be a better term. Whether it should be or not, that's a question we could discuss, but there's no doubt that right now the law says, if you're just out hiking in the wilderness, regardless of whether you spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in an area full of grizzly bears and cougars and wolverines and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Wolverines are nasty. I don't know. Do they ever actually attack people?
They can. They
They
have.
could.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm not. I'm not as up on my wilderness who's who as you would be.
Sure.
Because that's your area of expertise. But doesn't matter how much time you spend there. If you're not working there,
Mm-hmm.
it's not an option.
Yeah.
Okay. So. We have that there are provinces where there's virtually no need for them. Like if you're in Prince Edward Island, I don't think there's any grizzly bears in Prince Edward Island. I'm not sure there's anything big enough to pose a threat to people in Prince Edward Island, but there's certainly much less than there is in Alberta,
Sure.
at least. Okay. So, I don't know whether they even have that category as something that they do as part of their product line at the Chief Firearms Office there. But here it certainly is part of our product line because we've got lots of grizzly bears, we've got lots of cougars, we've got lots of wolves, we've got lots of other things that are
Wild animals.
red in tooth and claw.
Yeah.
That pose potential risks, and so it is something that we issue on we have to follow the federal guidelines on it, but we do issue them on a fairly regular basis. And, one that people often don't think about is if you, for example, are a rancher in an area near the Rockies and there's grizzly bears roaming around and you're out working on your fence, a case might be made that you need to have an ATC when you're out there so that you come back at the end of the day.
Sure.
And, we've taken a relatively flexible position on these things. It's not the Wild West, not open season, just come in and say you want one.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can make a reasonable case for it, then it is something that people need here. There's a legitimate need for that here in Alberta.
Yeah, there's a checklist you guys have to go through that
Mm-hmm.
all firearms officers have to go through.
Yeah.
And
But what I would like to emphasize, though, is that people should be thinking of that as a last resort.
mm-hmm.
That number one should be being bear aware and, making sure that you are not exposing yourself to undue risk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And everyone that I have spoken to who actually works with bears, like bear specialists,
Yep.
people whose whole job is bears, say bear spray is generally going to be more effective because it's not as close a requirement for accuracy. But as a backup, a firearm could be a useful thing in some cases. I would like to see people have a high degree of proficiency if they're in those, if they're going to be using a firearm for a purpose like that. But like I said, it's a legitimate thing. It's legally allowed, and we do it.
I remember years ago there was a gun store in Surrey, and the police kept coming by that store because there's some gangsters that were coming in, and they kept warning them. I mean, hey, these guys are violent. There's going to be some problems, and they're like, well, maybe we should be seeing if we should get an ATC here. I mean, there's another store in BC where they were robbed, and I think it was a husband and wife. They both got executed in there, and they used that as an example, and a few others. And they applied for ATCs for protection of their life based on what was going around and the information they were getting from police. Provided them training. They were highly proficient. They met all of the protocol up into the point where the firearms program says, look, you've met everything that we're looking for the issuance. We just need a letter from the chief of police in Surrey here saying that their protection is not adequate. They said it can't come from a police officer. It's got to be the chief of police, and they got to say that protection is not adequate for you, and then we'll issue it to you. Of course, there's no chief of police who's going to turn around and say that the protection that they have to offer is not adequate, and that's where it was finally stymied. Have you heard of incidences where people actually are successful in obtaining a ATC? Like I've heard hearsay. I've heard people tell me, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Well, for defense of life, you mean?
For defense of life.
Well, defense of life is such a rare category that I can't, for security reasons, I can't tell you exactly what we've done. But
sure,
like in all of Canada, you're talking about a handful of people.
Right. Okay.
And so it's not something that comes up, I can't say in 50% of cases when you're talking about a handful in the country.
Sure.
So, but in any case, as I've indicated, it's kind of a moot question for us because at any day, I'm expecting to have that power completely removed from me. And then it will be the Commissioner of Firearms. And I suspect that whatever decision I would have made, the Commissioner of Firearms might be considerably more reticent to
Fair
issue than I would have been. And, I understand, like when I grew up, some of the places we lived, it was quite a distance to a phone, let alone to a police station.
Yeah.
So I understand people have a variety of security needs, and perhaps that would be something that a future government will revisit, but certainly this one's not prone to reconsideration of such things.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that we should be talking about?
Well, we've covered quite a lot of ground
We have
here today, Travis, but I guess, if I were closing things out, I always just want to give people some reassurance that we might be in somewhat dark times in the firearms community at the moment, given the unfounded attacks that have been made on our community and many of the ill-advised measures that we've been subjected to. But the firearms community is not without friends. We do have friends in Ottawa we have friends. Our provincial government is a very strong supporter of law-abiding firearms owners. I am working every single day of all of my energy to try and make sure that the firearms community has a bright future. And as long as we are able to have a system where firearms ownership is regulated in a fashion to ensure that it's consistent with public safety, then I think that we will, in the end, be successful in convincing enough people in Ottawa to make the rules that we need, and that we here in the province of Alberta will be leading the way in showing the rest of the country how those laws can then be interpreted in a fashion that is helpful to the firearms community and entirely consistent with public safety, and then basically spreading the gospel across the country as Alberta leads the way in this area as in so many other aspects of government policy.
Teri, it was an absolute pleasure having you on the Silvercore Podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Travis. I very much enjoyed being here with you and sharing some of the exciting things that we're doing here. And keep the faith, folks. We'll get through this period.